So this is the third and last YouTube video concerning the corrections of your microeconomics exam. The first video that I made, that was all about question 1. The second video which I made was about question 2, and this third and last video is substantially longer, and it'll cover questions 13 to question 15. 15 is the last question. This is question 3, and it reads, consider the following events. Scientists reveal that eating oranges increases the risk of diabetes, and at the same time, farmers in Spain use a new fertilizer which increases the yield of orange trees. What effect these two changes have on the equilibrium price and quantity of oranges? So what we have here are two events, one a supply event and the other one a demand event. So let's identify the first event, and there it is. Scientists reveal that eating oranges increases the risk of diabetes. Well, this is a demand event because this revelation, when disclosed, will affect consumer behavior. So when scientists reveal that eating oranges increases the risk of diabetes, the effect will be a decrease in the demand for oranges. And that will bring about two changes. Price will decrease and quantity will decrease. And at the same time, meaning there is a second event which occurs simultaneously with the first one. So the second event is farmers in Spain use a new fertilizer which increases the yield of orange trees. That just means that this fertilizer has the effect of, producing more oranges. So that is a supply event. This would cause supply to increase, a rightward shift of the supply curve. So what effect will that have on price and on quantity? Well, if supply increases, if this rightward shift of the supply curve occurs, that means that the price will go down and the quantity will go up. All right? And now what we have to do is figure out what the net effect is, the combined effect of these two events. The first one, the demand event, and the second one, the supply event. So we want to know what happens to price and what happens to quantity. Now, mind you, we are not told which event is stronger or whether they are of equal power. So, in regards to, let me switch colors. In regards to price, as you see, price goes down and price goes down. So we're sure that the price will go down. When it comes to quantity, however, you see that quantity decreases here and increases here. So what is the net result on quantity? Well, the net result is a question mark. The question mark means that we are not quite sure because we don't know we're not told about the strength of each one of these events. So the question mark means that there are three possibilities in regards to quantity. quantity can either go up, down, or it can remain the same. In other words, no change in quantity. So these were the two answers. Each one of these was 1 point. Question 4 is of a similar nature. The question reads, what would happen to the equilibrium price and quantity in the bicycle market if the demand for bicycles increases more than the increase in the supply of bicycles? So here we are able to identify two events, and we're being told that one event is stronger than the other event. So, well, we're not precisely told what the event is, or what we are being told is that there's a demand event and that there is a supply event. So in regards to the demand event, the demand for bicycles increases. So when the demand for bicycle increases, the price of bicycle goes up and the quantity of bicycles goes up. And we're told that there's an increase in the supply of bicycles. So the supply of bicycles increases, and that's a rightward shift of the supply curve. So price goes down and quantity increases. Now, in this case, in question number 4, unlike in question number 3, what we're told is that the demand event, this increase in demand, right, is stronger than that. This increase in demand is stronger than the increase in supply. So let me change colors. Red, when it comes to price, what's going to happen? Well, the demand event is stronger, so the price will go up. And when it comes to quantity, well, quantity goes up. So these are the two answers: price going up and quantity going up. Each one of these correct answers was 1 point each. In question 5, we're given the demand schedule, and we are also given the supply schedule. All right. So 5A reads, using the data from the table, draw the demand and supply curves together. So we put together a market diagram, right? Step 1, we label all of the variables. So what should we call this? This is the football ticket market, right? Price, quantity. Now, regarding the demand curve or line, this is a linear model. What do we notice about demand? Well, we notice that when the price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. What this means is that the demand curve is negatively sloped. In other words, it looks like this. So that's the demand curve. In regards to the supply curve, we notice that when the price goes, well, down or up, quantity supply does not change. At a price of 10,000, there are 30,000 tickets. 40,000, excuse me, $40 per ticket, 30,000, etc., etc. So the supply curve looks like this. It's perfectly inelastic. So you had to draw it this way. It had to be shown as vertical, as perpendicular to the x-axis. So this would be the equilibrium. Let's call it E1. Equilibrium price is what? The equilibrium price is $30, because at $30 per ticket, QD is equal to QS. So price, $30 per ticket, and here we could have put 3 zeros, implying that we're dealing with thousands, and we could have labeled Q. Let's label this P1 and this Q1. So what's Q1? Q1 is 30,000, because we would add these 3 zeros here. All right. So let's see if we have completed the A part of 5. Using the data from the table, draw the demand and supply curves together. So that's the drawing. This is the kind of a drawing that I expected from you. In B, well, B reads, fully and clearly explain the unusual shape of this supply curve. And the reason that this supply curve, so the answer is, the reason this supply curve is vertical or perpendicular to the x-axis is because the number of seats in this football stadium is limited to 30,000 seats. So it doesn't matter whether prices go up or down. Quantity supply does not react, again, because supply is fixed. Quantity supply is fixed. So I expected this kind of full and clearly developed answer. In C, well, you're given a scenario. Your team plans to increase total capacity in its stadium to 35,000 seats next season. What admission price should it charge? Well, the implication here is that supply, this is S1, yeah, that supply would increase. So it would be a rightward shift of the supply curve from S1 to S2. So this would have meant a new equilibrium, E2, and a lower price. If you did this in a proportional way, something I cannot do here, the answer would have been stated as $25. And the new quantity, Q2, would be 35 plus 1, 2, 3 zeros, 35,000 seats. Okay? So this is the appropriate diagram, and these were the appropriate responses to my questions. Question 6. Popeye's income declines, and as a result, he buys more spinach. So is spinach an inferior or a normal good? All right. This is one part of the question. And the second part of the question is, what happens to Popeye's demand curve for spinach? So let's see. Popeye's income declines. Popeye's income declines. Excuse me, I made a mistake there. Back to red. So we're told that Popeye's income declines, and as a result of this income decline, he buys more spinach. So demand for spinach goes up. So the first question is spinach an inferior or a normal good? Well, what is in evidence here is that spinach is an inferior good because there's an inverse relationship between income changes and the changes in demand. Had spinach been a normal good, then when income declined, demand should have declined. But that's not the case, right? Since spinach to Popeye is an inferior good, that means that when his income level dropped, the demand increased. And the second part of the question is, what happens to Popeye's demand curve for spinach? Well, here it is. Demand increases. Question 7. Assume a negatively sloped demand curve and a positively sloped supply curve in the market for mozzarella. Okay? Mozzarella cheese. And the question is the following statement true or false? And obviously we also have to explain why. Well, the statement is an increase in the demand for mozzarella cheese raises the quantity of mozzarella demanded, in other words, QD, but not the quantity supplied. So is that true or false? Well, my approach here is to go through a diagram. So let's start. Step 1, identify the market. This is the mozzarella cheese market. Okay. And at the very beginning of this question, we're told that demand is negatively sloped and supply is positively sloped. Okay, so this would be equilibrium, this would be the equilibrium price, and this would be equilibrium quantity, Q1, at which QD1 is equal to QS1. Okay, all right, I want to switch colors to blue. And now what we're testing is this statement, an increase in the demand for mozzarella cheese. So let's increase the demand for mozzarella cheese from D1 to D2. That's a shift, a rightward shift of the demand curve. So an increase in the demand for mozzarella cheese, well, let's see what it does, and then we'll see if the statement is true. So there's a new equilibrium here, E2. The price is higher from P1 to P2, and quantity is higher from Q1 to Q2. And Q2, this new equilibrium, means that QD2 is equal to QS2. All right, let me change colors again. So now, an increase in the demand for mozzarella cheese raises the quantity demanded. All right, so is that true? Raises the quantity demanded. Yes, it does. We notice that quantity demanded goes from QD1 to QD2. From QD1, which is here, to QD2, which is right there. So that's true. All right. Now the second part of the statement, but not but not the quantity supplied. So what you're being told here is that quantity supplied does not increase. Well, is that true or false? Well, that's false. That's very false, because we see that when demand increases, not only does QD increase from QD1 to QD2, but also QS also increases from QS1 to QS2. So the statement is false. Both QD and QS increase. Well, you know the trick, right? In order for the whole statement to be true, all of the parts have to be true. What we noticed is that part of the statement is true and part of it is false. But again, in order for the statement to be labeled as true, all of it has to be true, which is not the case here. Part of the statement is false. So the answer is false. Question 8 reads, how many tennis rackets will firms be able to sell if the price is $25? And then you were supposed to explain, well, fully and clearly explain the answer. So let's see. The price is 25, and firms are going to produce 160. Well, how many tennis rackets are consumers able and willing to buy? 60. The question, you notice, is about selling. How much are firms able to sell to customers? Although they produce 160, they can only sell 60. So the answer is 60. Firms, at a price of 25, firms will be able to sell only 60 units. Obviously, there's going to be a surplus. Question 9 reads, if the price of good X and the quantity demanded of good Y are positively related, then the goods are complements. True or false? It was not enough just to say true or false. You had to clearly and fully explain your answer. So my approach is the following. I choose a set of complements or complementary goods, and they are coffee and sugar. All right, so let's see. If the price of coffee goes down, let's say, then what happens to the quantity demanded for coffee? Goes up. And the question is, what happens to the demand for sugar? Well, if more coffee is being drunk, then the demand for sugar is going to be higher. Okay, so what kind of a relationship is this? Obviously, the change in the price is the cause, and the change in demand or quantity demanded, this is the result. Are cause and result moving in the same direction or opposite directions? Opposite direction. They're moving in the opposite direction. As the price of coffee goes down, the demand and quantity demanded for sugar goes up. So, if the price of good X and the quantity demanded of good Y are positively related, then the goods are complements. Well, that's not the case here, right? What we have just shown is that complementary goods have a negative relationship and not a positive relationship. So the statement is false. Question 10 reads, you are given information regarding price elasticities of demand, and here they are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And the task at hand is predict the corresponding direction of change, plus, minus, or no change, in total revenue. So you have to tell me what happens to total revenue in these 6 cases. All right? And then you have to fully and clearly explain each one of your answers. All right, so let's take the first one, and that's situation A. In situation A, there's an increase in the price of cars. There's an increase in the price of cars, and the question is, what is going to happen to total revenues? An increase in the price of cars. So let's see. If the price of cars goes up by let's say 10%, then what happens to the quantity demanded? Well, where are cars? There they are. Automobiles. There they are. So if the price of cars goes up by 10%, then the quantity demanded for cars goes down because of the negative sign, and quantity demanded will go down by how much? By 21%. So the question is, what's going to happen to total revenues? Well, let's see. Up by 10, down by 21. Well, I think the quantity demanded effect is stronger, so total revenues will go down. This is 10B, and the product in question is potatoes or potatoes. And what we're told is that the price of potato falls. So if the price of potatoes falls by 10%, what will happen to the quantity demanded? Well, it's going to go in the opposite direction because of the negative sign. It's going to go up by how much? By 3%. So the question for us again is, what happens to total revenue? Well, price goes down by 10, but quantity goes up by 3. Which is the stronger effect? It's the price effect. So total revenues will go down. That's the answer. Total revenues go down in B. In 10C, the product is electricity. So, what are we told? We're told that, well, that's the way it's phrased. If there's a decrease in the price of electricity, what happens to total revenues? So if price of electricity drops by 10%, then what happens to quantity demanded? Well, it's a negative sign, so quantity demanded will go up. By how much? By 13%. So, once again, we want to know what happens to total revenues. So, down by 10, up by 13. Well, which is the stronger effect? It's quantity demanded, so TR is going to go up. So that's the answer. Total revenues will go up. Question 10D, D for David, is about the cigarette market. So we're told that the price elasticity of demand is, well, for cigarettes is negative 0.5. That's inelastic. So let's see. What are we told? If the price of cigarettes increases, if the price of cigarettes increases by, let's say, 10%, what happens to the quantity demanded for cigarettes? Again, there's a negative sign there, so QD will drop by how much? By 5%. So once again, we want to know what happens to total revenues. Well, price up by 10, quantity demanded down by 5, which is the stronger effect. It's the price effect. So TR, total revenues, go up. This is question 10E, and the product is insulin. Okay, and as you notice, the price elasticity of demand for insulin is 0, which makes it perfectly inelastic. Consumers are not responsive to changes in price. Okay, so what are we told is the price event? In E, we're told that the price of insulin goes up. So the price of insulin goes up by, oh, it doesn't matter. I keep using 10, but you, again, have not forgotten that 10% is a number of convenience because it's just easy to deal with. So let's say 1%. So if the price of insulin goes up, let's say by 1%, then the question is, what happens to quantity demanded? Well, there's no change, right? No change. Price goes up, price goes down, given this price elasticity of demand of 0, there's no change in quantity demanded. However, the picture is not about quantity demanded, the question is about total revenues. So if the price goes up by 1% or 2% or 10% or 20%, but there's no change in QD, well, what will happen to total revenues? Total revenues will go up. So that's the answer. TR goes up. Okay, so here we are. Number 10F, which is the last one, and my favorite one too. So the product in question is beer. And you notice that the price elasticity of demand for beer is negative 1.0, which makes beer unit elastic. All right, so what are we told about the price change here? So in F, we're told that there's an increase in the price of beer. There's an increase in the price of beer. The amount is not told to us, so we have to invent it. And I have chosen up to now 10%, and in the last case I chose 1%. So let me work with 10 again. So if the price of beer goes up by 10%, well, what happens to the quantity demanded? Well, given the negative sign, quantity demanded will go in the opposite direction, in this case down. So QD will decrease by 10%. So again, We want to know what happens to TR. Price up by 10, QD down by 10. What happens to total revenues? No change to total revenues. No change. Interesting question. Question 11. During the summer of 1993, severe flooding in the Midwestern U.S. destroyed corn, wheat, and soybean crops. During the summer of 1994, severe flooding in the Southeast destroyed a large portion of the peanut and cotton crops. Well, A and B are related, so I'm gonna talk about them simultaneously. All right. So in A, if the demand is relatively inelastic in the markets for these agricultural products, make a prediction concerning farm incomes in light of these disasters. So A is basically asking us to predict what happens to total revenues. The total revenues of the farmers, farm incomes, total revenues of the farmers. And in B, show graphically, in other words, draw the market situation depicted in A. Make sure to label correctly all the appropriate variables, etc., etc. So let's take question 11 apart. First, we have to give it a name. You remember, we always have to label our markets. So what shall we call it here? Let's call this market an agricultural market, which is a compilation of corn, wheat, soybean, what else? Peanuts and cotton. So agricultural market, and it looks like this. Price, quantity. We're given a very valuable piece of information here. Demand. The demand curve is relatively inelastic. Inelastic. Does that mean steep or flat? Well, inelastic is steep. So this is the demand curve. Not perfectly inelastic. That's not what the question tells us. Demand is relatively inelastic, but not perfectly inelastic. So it's inappropriate to draw a vertical demand line. And there's no information here about supply, so we can safely assume that supply is, well, the supply line is drawn in a neutral way, let's say. Okay, so let's label this as S1, because we know what's coming. So this is the first equilibrium, right? This is, this is E1. So this is P1, and this is Q1. Well, all these calamities, severe flooding and, well, mayhem, disasters, what does it do? Demand or supply events? They're supply events, so supply decreases from S1 to S2. We can safely assume that not every farmer in this area gets wiped out. There are some survivors. We're not told how many, but there are survivors. So what happens here? Well, there's a new equilibrium. E2. So what happens to price? Price goes up by a lot because of the nature of this market. These are agricultural products. They're necessities. And by being necessities, that's what makes them inelastic. So price goes up by a lot, you notice. And what happens to quantity? Quantity goes down, but down by a little bit. So again, the question is, what happens to TR? Well, if price goes up by a lot and quantity demanded goes down by a little bit, then we can safely say that total revenues go up. That's a nice way to say, let's not cry for the farmers. Well, those isolated ones that lost everything, yes. But from an industrial perspective, the net effect is higher total revenues or higher farm incomes. All right. So number 12 is a numerical one. All right, and let's extract the goodies here. We're dealing with a cigarette market, and we're told that the price elasticity of demand is negative 0.4. That makes cigarettes very inelastic. We're also told that the price of cigarettes is, it's $15. And we're told that, what are we told? We're told that the government wishes to reduce smoking by 10%. So the government wants quantity demanded to decrease by 10%. Okay? Okay, and the question is, by how much should it increase the price? The price is 15. The government wants to lower quantity demanded. So should the price go up or down? The price should go up, because there's a negative relationship between price and QD. So the government should increase the price. Well, the question is by how much? The way the question is stated, we don't want an actual price, we want the percentage change in the price. So let's see. Where do we start with this? Let me switch colors. So let's start here. The price elasticity of demand equation is, you remember, percent change in QD divided by the percent change in price. Okay, now from the information given, we note that the price elasticity of demand is negative 0.4. We're also told that the government wants to decrease the quantity demanded by 10%. So in the numerator should read minus 10%. And in the denominator, well, percent change in the price. Well, that's the unknown, right? So we'll put it this way: X percent. The X means percent. Excuse me. The X will mean change or percent change in price. All right. So if we do the math, let me do it in red here. Yeah, we would multiply these two numbers and equate them to negative 10%. So how would this look like? Negative 0.4x percent is equal to negative 10%. I'm kind of taking liberties with this math, right? And then we divide both sides by negative 0.4, negative 0.4, and we get X percent is equal to 25. So the answer is the price should go up by 25%. All right, I'll just show you how this would look like with all the numbers in. So the price elasticity of demand is negative 0.4. In the numerator, we have the percent change in QD as negative 10%. And in the denominator, we have the percent change in price as plus 25%. So if we do the math, if we divide negative 10% by positive 25%, we would get the price elasticity of demand for cigarettes of negative 0.4. With this question, there was an expectation that you would write a short essay fully and clearly explaining how OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, manipulates the price of oil. The basis of this analysis would be that OPEC is a cartel. It is an oligopoly. And what oligopolies, what cartels do, is they come together in order to, well, to avoid competition, to avoid price wars, to take it easy, basically. And the way OPEC works, the way successful cartels, oligopolies work, is that they come together. In the case of OPEC, I think there are 13 members. Offhand, I don't think I'll be able to tell you all 13. I could come close, but I don't want to try. So this cartel of 13 or whatever countries comes together, and they decide on how much to produce. In other words, they decide on supply. And by manipulating the supply, by either increasing or decreasing supply, they're able to manipulate the price of oil. That's not to say that they are always successful. Most recently, there's a war going on internationally between OPEC and Russia. In regards to question 14, what I expected is what I expected is also a short essay. And the subject, why are pharma prices higher in the US than in the European Union? Well, because in the US, the pharmaceutical companies, they are pretty much protected by the government, which means that they have monopolistic power, oligopolistic power. And that means that they're able to charge higher prices. One case in point is regards to insulin. Last time I looked, there were three companies in the United States producing insulin. And what also makes them strong from a monopolistic perspective, from an oligopolistic perspective, is that a lot of these pharmaceutical companies, they have patents, and these patents last a very long time, and the pharmaceutical companies normally do not allow these patents to fall into the public domain where they can become generic drugs. So, I mean, you know, you could have embellished this narrative in trying to answer the question, why are pharmaceutical prices higher in the US than in the European Union? And finally, the last question of the exam, another essay question, that was the expectation. The question reads, what did the Holy Smoot Act try to accomplish? Well, you remember we did this in class. What this act tried to accomplish was trade protectionism. This was a tariff act. And what happened in the United States, I believe the year was 1930. So in 1930, the Herbert Hoover administration, in order to defend the U.S. economy, in order to maintain employment in the United States, because the U.S. was undergoing a big economic contraction, which eventually led to a recession and then depression. So what the Hawley-Smoot Trade Act attempted to do was to practice trade protectionism, to defend American markets from foreign markets. Well, that was the stated goal, but it did not. It was not successful, because as soon as the Americans increased their import taxes, the rest of the world reciprocated, or more precisely, retaliated, and this slowed the global economy down. So didn't work. Well, so this kind of a narrative was the expectation in answering this question. Okay, so the end of the review. I will post this on Teams for Microeconomics Team 2A. I'll post it under Team Microeconomics 2A, and for Team B, I'll post it under Microeconomics 2B. All right, and hopefully you'll watch it and rewatch it. I think it's a good review for things that will come. All right, so make sure you watch all 3 videos. The first one, which covers question 1, the second one, which covers question 2, and this third and last one, which covers questions 13 to the end, to question 15. And I'll be posting some more stuff. All right, I'll be posting homework assignments and projects. And also, I've been told by the administration that they will keep me posted as to the requirements, because the requirements might have changed. I have no idea. But I'll keep you informed. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.